but it also represents this pensive and ability to leap nature.
What was the advice you absorbed from the mentors or parental figures in your life that helped you scale, every opportunity you tackled on with such, great depth?
However, making that leap from institutional finance to consumer finance.
Hello and welcome back to the Masters of Real Estate. This is Nick Shah. Today, I'm very excited about guests we're going to talk from and learn from. We're going to learn from Sipho Simela. Sipho, how's it going, buddy?
Doing well, thanks, Nick. How are you?
Likewise. So Sipho, how do you introduce yourself these days?
Sure. So my name's Sipho Simela, and I'm the founder and CEO at Matrix Rental Solutions.
Founder and CEO at Matrix Rental Solutions. Sipho, before we get into Matrix, people really want to understand what you're like. So if you were to pick a spirit animal or bird to describe your operating philosophy in life, what would you pick?
You know what? I think I would pick the lion. I'm a first generation Zimbabwean immigrant, so close ties to Zimbabwe. And, the lion represents strength, but it also represents this pensive and, ability to leap nature.
Love it. Strength and ability to leap nature. Are those kind of your core operating principles in life?
They are. Internally you have to remain strong, and especially when you're going through the startup journey as a founder. Being a solopreneur in and of itself requires a certain amount of steadfast nature, but the ability to leap, the ability to see large obstacles and be able to overcome them. I love the lion because it exemplifies that every day.
I love it. So Sipho, if you think back to, your professional journey so far, and we'll get into that in more detail, but let's anchor that with a number. What key metric summarizes your professional journey till today?
So Nick, I've had a long journey. I started my career in capital markets, transitioned into two hyper-growth startup companies, and eventually landing here and founding my own company here at Matrix. I'm happy to say I've contributed to over $20 million in sales across my career here. Something that I'm very proud of, but the best is yet to come.
From capital markets to hyper-growth startups to starting your own shop at Matrix sounds incredible. And $20 million in sales seems like an amazing number to put a cherry on top of the cake. But let's go back to a phase in your life when it was zero in sales and when you were just starting off. What has been your broad trajectory so far?
Starting from early innings, as an undergrad, I was always a sports person. Played lacrosse when I was younger, and having that mentality of just continuing to look at the scoreboard. The way you prepare is to make sure that when you look at that scoreboard, you like the numbers that you see. So I would absolutely say that one thing that mentality has kept me pushing towards has been never think enough is enough, and when you think it's enough, do more. So my trajectory as far as being able to reinvent myself, being able to enter into new endeavors, new markets without fear. That's been something that I've prided myself on across my career.
Wow. And seems like, sports played a very strong role in shaping your discipline as well as your focus on a single metric. But seems like you also had quite a journey from Long Island to going to school in the Baltimore area to coming back and working in New York in capital markets. How was that journey like?
It's been a long and exciting one, Nick. This whole idea of never get too comfortable, whether that's in geography or the market segment you work in. I've had a journey, and, every day from my days in undergrad in Baltimore to, early in my career, working in New York, working in institutional finance, to finding myself in a complete unknown with, technology, fintech, in the Bay Area, and now really centering our company here around the great state of Connecticut, where I live and work. It's been a series of changes, but I think, that lack of fear, but also that willingness to continuously reinvent has been something that's keeping me driven.
Yeah, I've lived for Connecticut for a short amount of time. I was in Hartford and West Hartford for about 9 months, about 10 years ago. So yeah, love the great state of Connecticut. It seems like you also started your sales journey very early on. In college, in undergrad, you were the college relations director for Roxa Energy Drink. You helped the movie Hot Rod create a nationwide marketing campaign when you were at Allied Integrated Marketing. Your seems like your very first job out of college, and then you worked in sales in capital markets, starting with Bloomberg and Charles River. What did you learn about sales and retail sales and institutional sales during that time?
Well, one thing I would say, I mean, thanks for the early innings references in the career. I almost forgot about those. One thing that I think is a constant is the very first thing you ever sell is yourself. How do people perceive you? Are you well liked? Are you trusted? Are you able to get the job done and deliver on what it is that you're marketing or selling or positioning? All of those experiences taught me different things along the way. Starting from the earliest of, knocking on doors and selling trips or energy drinks. That's what transitioned into selling multi-million-dollar solutions to some of the world's largest financial institutions. But I think that confidence is one of those things that is a crawl, walk, run approach. It's built over time. No one kind of comes in and has it all figured out in a day. I've been at a series of journeys and, to where I am right now for quite some time, and I don't have it all figured out. No, I think that the most important thing is, steady and slow gets the worm.
Steady and slow gets the worm, indeed. So, see, for looking back at your journey in sales and the 20 million plus in sales you've done ever since you were, in your late teenage years till today, what do you think is a key differentiator between somebody who is good at sales versus somebody who is great?
Sales is process, Nick. No matter what you're selling, I started by saying that the first thing you ever sell is yourself, but there's a process that sits behind every time. If you can find something, selling is not peddling. When I think about the idea of being able to uniquely join a direct need in whatever market you're selling alongside the solution that you're delivering, you will win. And I think taking that approach, no matter where you are in your career, no matter what it is that you're selling, $2 cans of drinks versus, $2 million systems, there is an approach and a process that goes along with it. But I think the unifying principle is identifying value in the market.
Completely agreed. Completely agreed. Like you said, the first thing you sell is yourself. But in the end, unless the market has a need, unless it has a pain point, it's hard to win. But if it has a need and if it has a pain point, if you go about the process of sales in the right way, you will win. I love it. And it seems like your early career was more in institutional finance at Bloomberg and Charles River, and your middle career was more in consumer finance at Blend, which is a mortgage, SaaS, loan origination SaaS company, and Ocrolus, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Ocrolus. So how was, first of all, that transition like from dealing with institutional finance sales processes to dealing with consumer finances?
Well, I mean, it was a big jump. I think I like to say it was very well timed. Early in my career, I worked at two companies that were acquired by other larger companies. I was the good luck Chuck of early fintech for a while. However, making that leap from institutional finance to consumer finance, I saw a trend in the market. There were changes where companies like Robinhood and Coinbase were really starting to emerge on the scene. And what was once a financial services ecosystem that was driven by the institutional money started to transition to the sum of parts. I mean, at the end of the day, there are more people than there are companies across this country and across this world. And being able to unify those different pockets of money, no matter how small or how large, was something that was a trend that even today, X number of years later, we're still seeing the ball rolling in that direction. So, when I made the decision to transition from more of the institutional to now consumer driven, it really has shaped a lot of the moves that I've made in my career, and I couldn't be more grateful for it. But even at that time, it was still relatively early innings. So I don't think a lot of the proof points were out there, whereas so much it was, a calculated leap of faith.
Calculated leap of faith indeed. And seems like wherever you have transitioned, you eventually found success. You've eventually been promoted multiple times in an organization. What was the advice you absorbed from the mentors or parental figures in your life that helped you scale, every opportunity you tackled on with such, great depth?
I think very much like this idea that when you tackle a market need with a solution, working at companies is no different. Make yourself indispensable to an organization by identifying what it is that you can bring to the table more uniquely. I have done roles, I've done jobs that I haven't really loved, but I've gone there because it's been needed. And anytime you can fill a void in a market or at a company, you're destined for success if you're willing to work hard at it. So, I think like as I've thought about growing my career, it's something that I mentor even younger individuals to. If you think back, Nick, when it used to be okay to be an unpaid intern, it wasn't the most desirable job, but you could not part ways with the kinds of experiences that you had, but more importantly, the kind of impression that you left by willing to go in and value that experience so much. The same persists, as you get deeper and deeper in an organization, doing the things that are less desirable, but also being willing to work hard at them is an important skill to grasp and to develop.
Hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think you mentioned a really good sub point, which is every job is a business and every business is a job. In the end, all you're trying to do is try to solve a pain point, try to fill a void in the need. And if you want to do it in exchange for selling your time, it's a job. If you want to do it in exchange for selling your team's resources or times and capabilities, it's a business. But in the end, it's all about solving a pain point, filling a void, and tackling a need.
We're all selling something. And I think leading with empathy is a really big point to kind of double down on. Being able to lead with putting yourself into the eyes and the shoes of your company leaders, your manager, your customer, the organization that customer represents. I think that's really it's really something that if everyone could really harness and embrace, the sales cycle becomes a lot easier.
Couldn't agree more. Seems like you were quite an amazing trajectory. A lot of things have gone your way, Sipho. But have you ever been at a phase in your life that you felt like you couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, Nick, any founder that sits in front of you and tells you they've never experienced that is not being honest with you. The founder journey of a venture-backed startup is one that is littered with minefield. And not being able to see that light at the end of the tunnel is a very real thing. And it's something that every founder goes through more than likely multiple points in their journey. I'll go back to when I first started this company back in 2021. What I thought were milestones that were easily attainable, easily to be achieved, that would take 3 months. The best laid plans, right? 3 months turns into 6 months, 6 months turns into a year. That was the story for us here at Matrix. We thought that we were going to be securing venture capital in a very short period of time, but right around that time, market shifts, conditions, things change. And, I think that whole idea of not being able to see that light at the end of the tunnel, that's really where the light comes from within. I like to say that anyone that's going on a camping trip, pack batteries. If your battery's fully charged, pack extra because you need to be able to generate that internal light to be able to navigate even when you can't see that light at the end of it.
Pack batteries. I love it. I love it. So talking about Matrix and your founder journey, Sipho, what's keeping you busy these days? And anyway, also help explain the listeners, what they should know about Matrix Rental Solutions.
Sure. So here at Matrix Rental Solutions, we are laser focused on the residential rental ecosystem. Rental housing is of the utmost importance, not only to us personally, but professionally, or professionally, but personally. I told you I'm a first generation Zimbabwean immigrant, and coming from a family where many of my family friends have come to the United States, what I like to say, cash heavy, credit poor. If I had to choose one of those two things to be, I would certainly choose to be credit rich as opposed to cash rich. But the rental housing process right now, especially post pandemic, is very challenging. Credit scoring has an inherent bias to it. And, particularly minorities, immigrants, even younger people that lack that longer tail credit history are left out of a lot of the traditional process. But let's unpack that. Push button, get credit score, make decision is easy because it's instant. What we've done here at Matrix is we've leaned in with empathy, and we realized that, across the board, the whole ecosystem, owners and operators, consumers, public housing agencies are not benefiting by the status quo. And so we incorporated into our process, becoming a credit reporting agency, incorporating the fact that we connect to over 16,000 banks, credit unions, financial institutions. We also connect to over 1 million employers using our payroll connectivity. But, this triumvirate of different data solutions is what leads us to our Maya score, the Matrix Asset and Income Analysis. This is a blended credit scoring model that takes into consideration, quite frankly, the only thing that matters, ability to pay. our universal rental application, very much like common app in the undergrad admissions process, features a single application with a single set of screening criteria, and most importantly for the residents that use our platform, a single fee. The ability to complete a single application, but be able to use that application multiple times within a 30-day period. The backbone of our story is data, and I'll leave you with this, Nick. It's somewhat of an anecdote. Data has been considered the new oil. Oil, when in its crude form, not very useful. However, when harnessed and refined, can unlock some of the biggest powers that this universe has to offer. We use our differentiated data for good. We are the platform that's helping the thin file Uber driver with 5 times the monthly rent in income be able to get into that home. And so our tagline here at Matrix is we're helping more people into more homes faster.
I love it. I love it. So it seems like you are you're laser focused on helping renters improve their credit score by reporting their recurring payments and other payments to 16,000 plus banks and financial agencies. And through that, you're helping renters create a credit score with a single button that can be sent out to as many prospective landlords or decision process.
For a second, I just wanted to double back on that. So Nick, our market value is the rental application. So not the reporting of the credit. Our value proposition is this single application helps offset the multiple application fees that the residents pay in the market. I just wanted to stop you there before you got too far.
Absolutely. And it seems like the single application thesis is also becoming a law in certain states, right? Last I heard, California and Colorado had done some action around this. Can you educate us on that as well?
Sure. I mean, there's a cross section between the legislative approach and utilizing technology to drive better and faster outcomes. We are definitely seeing, because of the fact that the rental housing market, unlike mortgage and, higher level finance, these are concepts and industries that are regulated at the state and local level. And with that comes no broad brush to paint with. We're finding that across the country, many markets are adopting a legislative approach. Here at Matrix, our thesis is that by utilizing better technology that creates fairer, more equitable outcomes, we can actually bypass that and get to a point where the market functions more holistically and more balanced by simply creating better solutions to unlock data.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So how did you end up, Sipho, focusing on the rental market and laser focus?
Well, the rental housing market, when I first started my company, I wanted to pick something that, number one, I knew about, because I think that's fairly important. But, when you look at those that are the most vulnerable in a market that is most ripe for change and where the cost of being wrong is high. I like to say that in the United States, owning a home is a choice. However, for many of those 48 million families in the United States, renting is not that same choice. And for that reason, we wanted to tackle a problem that, yes, had a big, sizable, total addressable market, but we also wanted to tackle a part of the market that needed the help of technology most. And so, as we started circling the wagons, as we were building, we found that low to moderate income housing was an area where that cost of being wrong was in fact very high. And so as we found our home more naturally inside of local and state public housing agencies, we've been the beneficiary of a great reception. They've been the folks that we've dealt with, folks that we partner with today have been very receptive to the help because we feel like we're actually driving very meaningful outcomes.
Yeah, completely agree. And seems like, so what is the ideal customer journey of working with Matrix? Like at what point should a property manager or a tenant engage with Matrix, and what is the ideal customer journey from there?
Well, that the whole concept of leading with empathy, what you can expect by working with Matrix Rental Solutions or from a relationship with our company is, experts that have spent time in market, experts that understand the needs and the wants of the market. And, when you think about the idea that, I'll break down what I believe is, our thesis here as a company is that the supply side of this equation, the supply and the stock provided by the owners and operators in the space, there is so much of it that's sitting on the sidelines that for a lot of reasons is not made accessible to those in low to moderate income. From the consumer journey, public housing agencies are providing subsidies and they're providing rent relief to those individuals, but it really is a matching of that marketplace. Unfortunately, the journey on average for those that have voucher subsidies is about a 36 business day time to lease. And Nick, that's everything from the time a landlord says yes. And so by streamlining the process into the back end and shortening how long it takes for that lease up process to occur, our belief is we can incentivize more of that stock that's on the sidelines into the market, making it voucher accessible. So while my belief is that we still need to build net new, it's unfortunate because at the moment, building net new properties in affordable housing is neither fast nor affordable. And what we're really focused on is unlocking this potential, unlocking this stock that is currently on the sidelines and making it accessible.
Fascinating. And seems like there are some potential competitors in the market, Zillow Rental Manager, there's Turbo Tenant. So what do you do at Matrix that you feel separates you from 99% of the rest of the market?
So, let me be the first to say that, anytime that you're in a market that some of the large names that you mentioned are in, you must be swimming in the right direction. I think we ultimately all as technology companies want the same things. We want to create a fairer, more balanced, faster rental housing market. So with that being said, here at Matrix, what makes us different? What makes us different is our mindset and the technology and the solutions in one that we're providing. We are focused on the time to process of actually getting people into homes. Getting people into homes is more than just signing leases. It's now putting consumers with keys in hands and in homes, but it's about getting owners and operators paid faster. The sooner that you can unlock that journey and you can get these mutually beneficial outcomes, home gets filled, vacancy gets dropped, landlord gets paid, consumer gets housed. That is something that we're focused on here. So the mindset, the shift that we have. Additionally, our Maya score is differentiated in the sense that we are taking a true blended multi-factor approach to getting to ability to pay. We are the ones that are looking for what used to be gig sector worker is now a resident with a job and two others simply to make ends meet. We are following as true technologists, but also data scientists that are seeing the changing trends in the market. And I like to say in sports metaphor lingo, skating to where the puck is going.
Yeah, we just heard that in the last podcast. I couldn't agree with you more. In terms of this platform, is in you helping tenants build the right Maya score, helping prospective property managers review that. How do you monetize it?
Right. So we charge a single non-refundable rental application fee, which entitles that resident, albeit one application at a time, to submit as many applications needed to get approved over the course of a 30-day period. We have an implementation fee and a data maintenance fee, which allows us to more easily connect to external systems to give landlords and property owners that best of breed functionality. But on our data maintenance side, be able to make more easily accessible that data, not only for the consumer, but for the housing agencies, many of which require an annual recertification of income. A lot of these legacy processes, which once took weeks and months to complete, here at Matrix, we were able to complete those journeys within minutes.
Yeah. And through this journey at Matrix and building Matrix to where it is right now, Sipho, what was your aha moment of scale?
I'll tell you, Nick, that aha moment didn't come easy and it didn't come cheap. Most people think of cheap in the sense of how many dollars did it cost you. The one commodity that's more valuable than money is your time. We were fortunate enough early in our journey here at Matrix, the National Association of Realtors, Second Century Ventures. In 2022, we were selected for the prestigious REACH program, which is a scale-up program that Second Century Ventures invests in anywhere from 8 to 10 companies in the United States in both residential and commercial real estate. What we learned there was the kind of exposure to that market at such a high level. Exposure to that market was what gave us the confidence to really be able to plant our flag and cement ourselves as solving a high stakes problem like affordable housing. But I will say, having not had the partnership and the belief from an investor with the size, the magnitude of a Second Century Ventures, we very much would not have had the confidence to be able to make such a bold declaration.
So you feel like the declaration of the size of the market and the problem you're solving was your aha moment. Like that alone, the target addressable market alone led you to focus on the direction you wanted to go towards.
Well, it's a smaller, more narrow market segment. When you think about the idea of those that are in, call it low to moderate income versus the overall broader rental housing market, making a difference in salary W-2 income is very different than making a difference in an impact in the voucher subsidy accessible market. What's been nice is our ability to do both. I like to say our system good enough to underwrite the hardest to underwrite residents that have complexity of income, that have various subsidies and qualifications associated with their application versus, your salary W-2 worker, but we support. So what we've done is we found a nice home inside that larger portfolio of that property management or that company or that investor where, we really tackle well the hardest to handle as well as handling, the longer, broader tail of the portfolio. These aha moments have come at a cost. It's not for everyone. I like to say, housing is a contact sport and it's not for the faint of heart. I've been able to lean in throughout the last few years of this journey to really fully embrace the totality of the housing market.
Yeah, housing is a contact sport indeed. It's not for the faint of heart. What's the biggest risk of working with Matrix or working in industry like real estate?
Well, if anything, the last 5 years have provided us with quite the roller coaster journey. One thing about real estate is it's always said to be, the largest generational wealth shifter that you can invest in. However, many of the factors that make a risk profile around real estate are external. Changes in interest rates, changes in the overall supply demand capacity and pricing in the market. And really overall, take a look at the pandemic. That changed the way forever, I believe, the way that we look at the real estate markets in general. So, there is an inherent risk, I think, with assets themselves. However, the risk being across the overall market is probably the answer that I'd tell you because while we look at here at Matrix, we are small and mighty, but punch well above our weight class. We've been the ones that have been able to withstand the test of time. And we have a nice, long, broad future ahead of us here, being able to punch in the same weight class as some of the larger, more seasoned incumbents in the industry.
Yeah. Is that how you would define the culture in Matrix, small and mighty, but punch way above your weight class?
Never let them see you coming, Nick. That's one of the things that, we've really enjoyed and been, beneficiaries of. Most recently this summer, I was appointed to Director Sandra Thompson's FHFA, Affordable, Sustainable, and Equitable Housing Solutions Group, where I sit alongside some of the industry's juggernauts from companies that you'll see littered on the Fortune 500. And it's been a really exciting experience to be able to be at that table in that room with being able to provide, the insights and the outcomes that we've been privy to. But I think it just goes to show that, it's the size of the fight in the dog, not the size of the dog in the fight.
It is indeed. And seems like FHFA Director Sandra Thompson, as well as her predecessor, Mark Calabria, if I'm getting the name right, have been pretty optimistic and positive in getting technology companies involved in trying to figure out better and more creative solutions to the affordable housing crisis that we are facing as a nation today.
While I'm a firm believer that no technology is a silver bullet solution to a problem as complex as the affordability of housing in the United States, where technology can add a lot of value is with these incremental lifts, automating away processes that require lots of high touch, lots of hands, lots of time. This is where, we're really aligning on the right solutions.
Hmm. And what's the story behind naming your company, Matrix Rental Solutions?
Nick, I'm a movie guy. The Matrix is one of my favorite. Matrix was one of my favorite movies growing up. And, I'll tell you, there's probably a backstory inside there of, the reality being that this whole dichotomy between the world that you see and the world that is, I think is no better classified than the way that we look at the housing market. There are so many kind of inherent challenges that, you're not going to see turning on the news every day. But for true housers, if you will, and people that are really, digging in and fighting on the ground level for overcoming those challenges and working on behalf of the overall ecosystem, it's a matrix in and of itself.
It is a matrix in and of itself. So, Sipho, what are the biggest challenges you're facing in scaling your team or operations to reach your aspirational goals over the next 12 months?
Growing fast enough. I think the biggest concern is growing. We're growing at the comfortable rate that we want to right now, hyper growth, but making sure that we are growing with mindful tactic. We look at all of our partners across the board. Today, we have over 250 customers. As we continue to grow, we want to make sure that we're growing with the same mindset, the same attention, the same industry insight that got us to the first 250 customers. And so, in the seat of a founder CEO, you never want to lose sight of what got you. Those are my big challenges that you ask me what keeps me up every night, aside from information security and the same stuff that keeps every tech founder up at night. It is making sure that we grow with the same mindful acumen that got us here.
Yeah, completely agree. So for a property manager listening to this right now, or, somebody who is focused on in a housing agency who's focused on solving affordable housing problems, for them to learn more about you and Matrix Rental Solutions, how should they reach out to you and your team?
Well, I would lead with, come on in, the water's warm. Here at Matrix, we are tackling the largest existential threat to the United States economy, and that is the affordability and the supply of housing. We are reachable across our socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, info@mymatrixrent.com. But we are always listening. You don't find us first, we'll find you kind of thing. But the reality is that we are constantly looking for innovators, people that are looking to solve challenges at the grassroots level in their own communities. We love the partners we have right now. We love the institutions and associations that we partner with right now. And we are constantly on the lookout to help make that next big impact in the lives and in the communities across the United States.
Absolutely. And see, for zooming out, looking at the future, what's your ultimate vision for the future of the housing industry? Like, where do you see the ultimate ideal customer journey as they navigate through the housing journey?
Well, I think it really focuses on this idea of this balanced ecosystem. One thing that technology can provide is the building of trust through transparency. When you think about consumers having control of their own data, initiatives that have been going on for 20 plus years right now to unlock that power of data, which was once locked inside of institutions and inside of places that were not easily accessible. That's directionally where we're going. Getting to a point where empowering consumers to not only harness, but understand the power of their data, creating a network and an ecosystem where that data is more easily accessible to the stakeholders that need it, i.e. the property managers and owners, the housing agencies, but making that pipeline more easily accessible faster, but at a lower cost of carry. And, where I see our company playing a pivotal role in this is utilizing everything that we've learned, everything we've built around technology to help create that pipeline and make it easier. Nick, there's an anecdote that we always say here at Matrix where we talk about trains. I talk about trains because everyone has been on a train at some point or another. But, at Matrix, we believe that really anyone can be a train, but not everyone can be the tracks. At Matrix, we're an infrastructure company. We want to be those tracks, and we want to make our technology easily accessible to the many trains that are already operating across our space.
Yeah, almost anyone can be a train, but not everyone can be the right track. I completely agree. Sipho, I'd love to ask you some rapid fire questions. What do you know about the housing industry or the rental industry that would surprise most people?
I think it's the ability to plug in and understand the full architecture of it, thinking about this vertically integrated pipeline of business where, what are the different levers that are pulled across the board? When I started this company coming from mortgage underwriting in that world, we wanted to apply something that at the time had been unheard of, a mortgage style underwrite for rental housing. And Nick, I'll tell you, if we were probably 5 years earlier than we were, I would have been told that, we are chasing small insects with very large swatting mechanisms. The reality is that the benefit of the mortgage style underwrite actually creates even more data points that's helping drive ability to pay. So while seemingly slightly more work, the use of technology makes that process far simpler than it's ever been. and far more easily accessible to people that had never thought they could have it within their reach.
That makes sense. So you're bringing the best features of mortgage term underwriting that truly verify a person's ability to pay their mortgage over the next 10, 20, 30 years and bringing it to the rental market, but making it hyper simple, hyper easy. So prospective tenants as well as property managers can look at that data very quickly and do tenant selection better.
The end state goal is to make the idea of very detailed underwriting as simple as the push button, get credit score, make decision modeling in the industry today.
So now, given your tremendous exposure in the mortgage market, the rental industry, and all that, say a family office calls you and says they've had a liquidity event and they've invested money in a bunch of different asset classes, but have $100 million left over that they just want to invest in real estate. How would you advise?
Well, I would advise them to think about the future of where the industry is going. There is a lot of exposure in terms of the fluctuation and the fluidity of the interest rates market. We've seen massive jumps across the board in not only new home sales, but the commercial real estate market, which has substantially changed and which is driving or being driven by this future of work. And so when thinking about, what is a truly safe asset class to invest in, I think about the idea that it's the space that we're playing in right now. While I would gladly say take your 100 million and invest it in Matrix, if I were giving a more broad lens approach to it, I would say that if you look at affordable housing rental market, and this is the money that is controlled within the budget of HUD, this budget has grown year over year for the last 25 years. So talking about the stability that our particular area and corner of the market represents, it is in fact one of stability. So my saying of the slow and steady gets the worm, there is nothing safer than this part of the residential rental housing market where it is worth investing in.
Wow. And is the HUD affordable housing rental market budget growing over the last 25 years? Is that primarily a directional indicator towards the budget for Section 8 housing, or is this other areas as well?
It is. Today, the Section 8, or what's now called Housing Choice Voucher market, makes up about 2/3 of that budget. And so, that budget is continuously being reinvested into assuring that fair market rate rent keeps up and keeps in line with competitive market rate rentals. It's assuring that the rehabs that need to be done to a lot of these traditionally built homes, being able to keep them up to market standard. But this budget has grown year over year and operated counter-cyclical to the entire rental housing market or the entire market of housing as a whole. So, thinking about ways to get one to get themselves exposure to this market, there are definitely a lot of avenues around, I think, highlighting the overall profitability of investing in affordable housing vehicles.
Yeah, it's fascinating insight indeed. Sipho, what's the best financial advice you've ever received?
Best financial advice: keep your credits more than your debits. No, I don't know. I think it would probably be something along the lines of saving for a rainy day. We all have rainy days, and what I think is probably common across the board is they happen when we would least expect them. Having come out of what we've just learned during the pandemic, where we faced a global event, a global threatening crisis, where those that were able to find themselves in a position of either being able to keep their jobs, being able to find new ones, being able to keep their finances intact, being able to generate new ways of income, saving for a rainy day. And that's everything, not just in money, cash in the bank, but being able to continue improving oneself so that if in an event of a left turn shift, you're well positioned to be able to rebound on your feet.
Completely agree. Final question, Sipho. If your loved ones agree to be mentored by you, what is the number one skill you would teach them?
The number one skill that I would teach them is, I'm a big believer in the value of being relatable. When it comes down to the idea of what makes a great salesperson, it's being able to sell with empathy, being able to connect the need of a market with the solution that might be inside of one's toolkit. Sales is something that you once you've learned and you've learned well, you can repeat that process across a number of different areas. The other thing I think that is extremely important is the value of being able to collaborate and being a good team member. Very much like being a good family member, being a good team member is extremely important. When people like you, trust you, want to work with you, they're a lot more likely to help you. And what I'll leave you with, Nick, is I think something that encapsulates that idea of being able to lead with empathy, but also being able to be a good team player is an African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. And I think that element of being able to go faster and further together is one that every good leader embraces and leans into. And it's one of the values that we highly value here at Matrix.
Mm. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. Be relatable, lead with empathy, and collaborate while being an amazing team member. That was Sipho Simela, the founder and CEO of Matrix Rental Solutions. He's a lion, strong and steadfast to seize large obstacles before you see them. If you're a tenant, a property manager, or a housing agent that want to take advantage of the amazing solutions his team is building, reach out to them on info@mymatrixrank.com. And I'll add a link to their socials in the description. This is Nick Shah. If you ever want to talk about real estate, shoot me a note on CEO@home. Thanks everyone.